a bell rang over a packed chapel in Seneca Falls, New York. Heat from the July sun pressed against wooden walls, and inside, women in hoop skirts and men in waistcoats leaned forward, their hearts echoing the same question. Can a woman ever be equal to a man? What followed wasn't polite conversation. It was a declaration that would echo across history. That moment in July 1848 was the spark that set the American women's rights movement alight. Nearly 300 people had gathered in the Wesleyan Chapel on July 19th and 20th for what organizers called a convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious condition and rights of women. The convention sprang from a gathering just days before at Jane Hunt's home, a Quaker tea where Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Martha Wright, Mary Ann McClintock, and Hunt herself resolved to act. Stanton, meeting Mott years earlier at that infamous 1840 London anti-slavery convention, where they were barred from speaking because of their sex, had carried a seed of resolve with her ever since. Now, she stood and read aloud a document she had drafted in McClintock's parlour, the Declaration of Sentiments. Borrowing the cadence of 1776's Declaration of Independence, it boldly proclaimed, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." Stanton's voice trembled as she listed 19 abuses and usurpations, laws that stripped women of property, earnings, legal rights in marriage and divorce, and even the custody of their children. The crowd gasped. Then came the resolutions, 11 calls for equality, all passed unanimously, except one, the demand for women's suffrage. The chapel grew tense. Would women have the audacity to claim a vote? In a twist of suspense, Frederick Douglass, the famed abolitionist, rose to speak. His voice rang clear. Nature has given woman the same powers. His support carried the day, and the suffrage resolution passed, albeit narrowly. At the close, over 100 people signed the declaration, 68 women and 32 men, staking their names publicly on a controversial paper that would attract praise, backlash, and even ridicule. More than half a century later, only one signer, Charlotte Woodward Pierce, was alive to cast a ballot under the 19th Amendment. Reactions varied. Local clergy condemned the convention. Ministers barred open discussion in their churches the following Sunday. Newspapers mocked it. Yet just 2 weeks later, Lucretia Mott spoke again in Rochester, this time electing Abigail Bush as the first woman to preside over a public meeting of both men and women in US history. That's where a movement truly began, not in one convention, but in perseverance. Between 1848 and 1862, dozens of state conventions sprang up. Petition drives surged, speeches were made, pamphlets circulated, often facing violent backlash. Over time, the Declaration of Sentiments became more than a local appeal. It became a foundational text for equality, referenced again and again as suffragists pressed on. Yet historians caution, Seneca Falls did not mark the absolute beginning of feminism. Black women had been organizing since the 1820s and 30s. Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, and others laid critical groundwork. And the narrative of Seneca Falls as the birthplace was popularized much later, partly through Stanton and Anthony's histories that shaped public memory. Still, it was a lightning rod, a spark that ignited generations. A moment when ordinary people, some even shoved through windows by hecklers trying to disrupt Session 1, chose outrage over helplessness. That chapel is now part of the Women's Rights National Historical Park. The three-legged table where the Declaration was drafted sits in the Smithsonian, venerated like Jefferson's desk. When Hillary Clinton marked the centennial in 1998, she spoke of sisters reaching across time. More recently, President Obama launched the hashtag #FindTheSentiments, a campaign to locate an original copy of the Declaration that remains lost. So what was Seneca Falls? Not the end, not the only beginning. It was a clarion call. Equality isn't handed down, it's demanded. It was proof that words, all men and women created equal, when whispered in a chapel, can roar across centuries. Because the fight for rights didn't end in 1920, voting rights, workplace equality, racial justice, they all trace back to that steamy July morning when 5 women and a daring document changed the lexicon of democracy forever. They asked, can a woman ever be equal to a man? And the world began to answer, yes, yes, she is.